Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Data Show. My name is Chris Greco. I'll be your host for the next 30 minutes. We'll be talking about different types of data, how we work it, how we parse it, how we figure it out, I guess basically is what this show is all about. Today, what we're going to talk about is dissecting the data. We're going to talk about parsing the data, trying to figure out exactly what it is that we want to find, why we want to find it, and how we want to apply that to our question or hypothesis. The subtitle is the fallacy of data analysis without standards. And I think that's where this all comes about. Is basically what happens is that we don't have good definitions for data, what we call data definitions. And I think what happens is when you don't have data definitions, what happens is that you just have, well, it's kind of like a person that sees something, whatever it may be, and says, "Oh, we have to have a requirement for that." This comes back down to project management, right? Systems engineering, any type of engineering you have to have requirements before you can have anything else. Those requirements are so incredibly important that if the requirements are not levied correctly, the entire project will fail. Same with data. If the requirements are not levied correctly on the data, then the data will not apply to what needs to be happening with the actual question. And that is what most of the media reports on, is they basically make their own requirements, or they state something in the headline that you think is a requirement, but in actuality is just basically clickbait. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and that's hopefully what we're going to see within this data. So, dissecting the data, the fallacy of data analysis without standards. So, what we're going to talk about is something very provocative at this point in time. I'm going to tell you, it's very controversial. And I would normally say I'm sorry for bringing this stuff up, but what happens is that the emotions in this country are running so high with this subject. I felt we need to take it back a step. And I realize that people have suffered and died as a result of this. That's not in any way, shape, or form to dilute that. It's not in any way, shape, or form to somehow make that non important. What it does is we have to put it in relative sense of what's going on within this country and within the world itself. Now, on the worldview, I talked a little bit about density of population. Just to be clear, just to be clear, the United States is basically about the third highest population country in the world. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. They sit back and they go, well, there's got to be another country that is more than us. Yes, there is. There's two. There's India and China. Other than that, folks, it's us. And we sit back and we sit back and we sometimes forget that we are the third highest population country in the world. I mean, we take a look at someplace like Canada. Canada has 10th of our population. So I mean, we sit back and go, geez, really? They have a huge landmass, but they don't have the population we have. Australia, huge landmass, not even near our population. So a lot of things we have to take into consideration in relative aspects, part of dissecting the data. So what do we do? In trying to figure out a project or data, whatever we want to talk about, we start with a hypothesis. Now, normally a hypothesis is a question that's turned into a statement. A politician stated that the leading cause of death in children is a firearm. Not in a firearm, is a firearm. The leading cause of death in children is a firearm. That's a quote. Now, this is a hypothesis. The leading cause of death in children is a firearm. It's based on the question, are firearms a leading cause of death in children? So actually this is backwards, but basically the same thing. You take a question, you turn it into a statement, that's your hypothesis, that's your claim. There's a claim there, right? And I think this is extremely important to understand. It's not a fact. This is not a fact. This is a claim. And what you're trying to do is basically prove or disprove the hypothesis, reject or not reject the hypothesis based on statistical significance. That's what a study does. That's what a study does, whether it be drug or whether it be any other type of aspect. You try to prove statistical significance. If you dissect the data in different ways, the hypothesis is analyzed differently. And I think that's important too. I'm just going to make a little editorial at this point in time, and you guys can fly over this. Is that there's a lot of data analytics stuff going on out there. There are tons and tons of things. Python, learn SAS, learn SPSS, learn this, learn that, learn R, learn blah, blah. But the bottom line is all that is worthless. Worthless without understanding the basic concepts behind data analytics. If you do not understand the basic concepts behind data analytics, all you're doing is using a bunch of tools. That's all you're doing. You're not understanding anything. You're just using the tools to come up with these calculations and these great graphs, but it means nothing if you do not understand what is going on behind the scenes. That's what I'm trying to do here. We use the Centers for Disease Control, CDC Wonder tool, to dissect the data, showing that different parameters result in different perspectives. So the CDC Wonder tool is probably one of the best data parsing tools available, in my humble opinion. You may find something else that's going to be tons more expensive to use. By all means, spend your money, because I think that's very important to be able to spend money on tools, because the more expensive the tool, the better it is, right? I mean, that's what everything is. The more expensive something is, the better it is. Every time. Am I being sarcastic? Absolutely. This has nothing to do with spending on a bunch of tools that basically are going to parse all this data. It has to do with, what are we looking for? How does it apply to our hypothesis? That's basically what we're talking about. So we're going to go to the CDC Wonder tool and do that. But basically, what we're doing is we're using what they call ICD-10 codes, international. So the I is international, which means it's used in Australia, it's used in Europe, it's used in Asia, it's used everywhere. And that's why it's called ICD-10, because those diagnostic tools, that international code for, I think it's international code for disease or diagnosis. We'll look it up. But basically what it is it's standard. It's a standard. You're doing apples against apples, right? Based on the ICD-10 codes. The Wonder page references underlying causes of death, which will disperse into a plethora of different diagnoses, and we'll go through that. We'll actually go through the CDC Wonder tool, and I'll show you how you can parse this thing in different ways to come up with different numbers, to come up with all these different, all of a sudden you have all these different perspectives. So that's where we have it. So let's talk about fact checkers. The fact checkers on this quote that was given by a politician. Snopes was the first one I looked up. And it seemed to include the same type of information that will be included in this video, right? Parsing, different data parsing results in different perspectives, right? PolitiFact tried to state the statement was mostly true, which is debatable. It's very, you could be argumentative about this whole thing based on the next few slides. I'm not stating that PolitiFact is biased. I'm just stating that if I were to do a study on PolitiFact, whether it be Republican or Democrat politicians, it amazes me how PolitiFact, in many cases, will judge the Democrat as being, mostly true, and the Republicans being mostly false. So it's interesting how that happens, and I'm actually going to do a study on that, and we're going to see how that works. But for right now, basically, PolitiFact states the statement was mostly true. NBC News had what I call the correct response to the politician's claims, which pointed out that slicing the data, parsing the data, dissecting the data can lead to different results. Duh, that's exactly right. And I hate to say you can make data fit your agenda, but you can. You can make data fit your agenda. So what do we do in order to not have that happen? Well, the first thing we have to have is definitions. The following questions are essential. What is considered a child? What is considered a gun-related death? What year is considered the year in question? And what is the relative risk to a child, right? Once the age is determined. So we're going to go through this, and then I'm going to go through CDC Wonder at the end here. What's considered a child? The data that was pulled from the CDC Wonder tool for that quote had an age range of 1 to 19. Now, are 19-year-olds children? Can they vote? Can they own a weapon? Can they enlist in the armed forces? Are children allowed this? So I think we have to sit back and say, what is a child, right? For that matter, what about 18-year-olds? Same. They can own a weapon, they can vote, they can do all those things. What happens when we get rid of the 18 and 19-year-olds from the data pool? So let's find out. So and also we'll do, what is a gun-related death? Are accidental discharges part of the equation? What about self-harm by a gun? Is assault with a gun part of the question, part of the equation? So we'll run through some of the different options in order to better understand exactly the data as a whole, so then we can parse through it. I think that's pretty important. So what were the numbers that were reported? Okay, according to PolitiFact, for ages 1 to 18, there were 3,219 deaths in 2020 for firearms, while there were 2,882 deaths by motor vehicle traffic deaths. Okay, PolitiFact. Later on in the same report, PolitiFact stated that there were 4,357 deaths for firearms for those ages 1 to 19. So let's talk about this for a second. By just adding 1 year to those numbers, that adds a significant amount of deaths, 1,100 deaths by just adding 1 year. So think about, if you get rid of that year, all of a sudden, bang, you're down at 32,000, at 3,219. So I mean, it's really interesting how just that 1 year, boom, it knocks it back down. Then PolitiFact started to I'm sorry, but they started to confound the analysis through having infants added and then other congenital deaths and such. PolitiFact, they're trying to, I think, in their transparency and trying to be as detailed as possible, I think what they do is they confuse people. And all people are looking for, I swear, is that mostly true, mostly false thing. And that's all they're looking for. So, okay, here we go. But I think fact checkers tend to just, they tend to take a look at what was recorded rather than the possibility of other things that could actually confound. They call them, in fact, in statistics, called confounding factors. Those things that also loop into the data, and basically can confuse and can confound the issue. Then PolitiFact added a source from New England Journal of Medicine. These are terms children and adolescents. So is it children or is it adolescents? Are we talking about children? And what do we? So the definition is very, very confusing. So, and then we finally come to, what year are we considering, right? So the most recent year of CDC Wonder, where most of the quotes are taken from, is 2020. And I do have 2021 in there under multiple causes of death, but not underlying causes of death, single cause of death. It's 2023, folks. It's the data is dated, and politicians who should know better are using that old data. I mean, 2020 was what? The midst of the pandemic, was just the start of that sucker. January, February, March 2020, we were in the throngs of it, right? Everything happened. And this includes former chief executives of the United States who are making comments based on the dated data. Instead of these chief executives, former or otherwise, making comments about old data and about things they hear from the media, maybe they ought to have their checkers, their data analysts, the ones that go through all this stuff, that buy the very expensive, tools and all that, go through that and see exactly what's going on. And sorry, I'm taking my shots at the very expensive data analytic tools because I'm sick and tired of these very, 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 very expensive tools that are out there. And not kind of like, R is free. You can do R, KNIME, KNIME. It's free. This stuff is free, folks. Why are people going out and spending thousands of dollars on a tool when they can get stuff for free? I don't quite understand that, but that's for a whole nother show. If you remove the 2020 numbers from the data, you get the chart on the next page, right? And I'll go through all that data. I'll go through it all towards the end of the show. All right. So where do we get the numbers? According to the source, the numbers were retrieved from the CDC Wonder application. Cool. I do not know the exact ICD-10 codes they used, and the article that discussed the research was unclear. University of Michigan, EDU, firearms now top cause of death among children and adolescents. Adolescents. Analysis shows. Adolescents. Is it children or is it adolescents? Remember, the quote was not very clear. It just talked about children. children. Why? Because that's more an emotionally charged term than saying young adults, than saying it's boom. It's all of a sudden it's children, boom. Oh. So the statement in one article is biased and takes into consideration 1 year between 2019 and 2020 to make this judgment. 1 year. I mean, really? Pre-pandemic, 2019, 2020, pandemic. Look, I'm not saying that pandemic, but it needs to be included as what they call a confounding factor. Very important, right? We continue to fail to protect our youngest population from a preventable cause of death. This is opinion. This was given by one of the researchers. It's an opinion. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of people, when they say things, unless they have facts to back it up, need to say, this is my opinion. I do. I try to say this is my opinion on stuff. On the expensive tools, I'll say it. That's my opinion. You want to go out and spend money, have at it. You want to do whatever you want to do, go for it. The bottom line is that, this is my opinion on this stuff based on experience, knowledge, and years. This individual who said that is some academician who has decided that he or she is going to put out this statement. And to me, that's all press. That's all my opinion, but I want it to get into press so University of Michigan can get their clicks. And this is the problem in our society right now. People are taking opinions and they're shoving them as fact, and it's not a fact. Just want to let you know. Now we consider, when they said, we have more firearms death than traffic accidents. Okay, what is a traffic accident? You have to define that. I went ahead and did some basic analysis using ages 1 to 9 and transport accidents on CDC Wonder. The number retrieved matches those that were published in some of the reports. If you want to see what I did, just go right there. Literally go right there. It will show you exactly the ICD-10 codes I used. It will show you the search aspect, everything. When you get done with this at CDC Wonder, you can actually save your search and you can make it into a saved search. And it's really nice because now people can go out there and they can see what I did and how I did it. Now it's interesting to note that some of the studies I saw actually do this. So that was nice, being able to see exactly what they did. And to tell the truth, this is not the study's fault. This is not the data fault. It's not the analysis fault. It's the definition fault. And that's where you come into definitions. This is important. I'm going to put this down here. If you don't have data definition, if you don't have it, you've got nothing. Definitions, it's so important I'm going to put it right underneath there. Definitions. You have to have a standard. If you don't have a standard, you cannot compare apples to apples. I keep saying this. I say it when I said it in Worldview on this last episode I had. I've said it here. Apples to apples. That means that you have to compare the same to the same. If you don't compare the same to the same, then that's not fair. It's not fair to do that. It's not a fair analysis. It's not a valid analysis. It's invalid. You cannot, you can't sit there and say, this is what I have. If you open the transport accident category, there are such things as pedestrian injured in transport accident, and pedal cyclist injured in a transport accident, and others. Are these part of the traffic accident areas that are compared to gun-related deaths? Now, I say this because, that could actually be lower traffic accidents deaths. So all of a sudden now that could still, you could still make your point. Hey, look, there are more children, however the children is defined, killed by firearms than there are in traffic accidents. So I mean, but again, it kind of almost, it begs the question, what about the 17? When do you start to drive? So basically, kids are killed in traffic accidents because they're passengers. But what about the drivers? So we have to sit back and go, you can drive at what age? 16, 17, 18? Do you want to remove those 16, 17, 18 from that to just show that the child was a passenger? Again, there's so many definitions, and that's pretty important. Then we come down to the last part, which is, what is the relative risk to the child? So this is done what they call relative risk between the number of deaths and the population of the age group. I did this in the worldview, talked about population density. The chart is shown on the next slide. As you can see, the relative risk is almost minuscule. This does not mean that we should not be concerned that somehow even one death does not mean anything, or it's one death is unacceptable. One is unacceptable for any children, seriously. But to talk about that from a percentage aspect, even one death is unacceptable. The data is there for you to analyze as many ways as you like. Okay, so here it is: death by weapons assault, age 1 to 19. That's the first one I want to show. So you see here, this is death by weapons assault, age 1 to 19. So we're all the way up here to 27. This is death by weapons assault. This is death by weapons assault, not by all the other, not the other ICD-10 codes that you had, but just by assault. You're talking about about 2,700. Now, risk of gun death, ages 1 to 17. Look at this: 0.0015% to a height of 0.0020%. It's very, very small, folks. Very, very small. Now, if you did this in Australia with their numbers and whatever else, you would find, I don't know what you find, but you'd have to compare it that way. And I think that's pretty important. So what does this all mean? Data can be manipulated to make it look much worse or much better than it actually portrays or displays. You are responsible for checking the data or asking the right questions concerning the data. If you let others decide for you what the data means, that is the same as having them decide how you should think. So we're going to do one more slide just to even out the analysis. This one shows ages 1 to 17 deaths from any type of car or truck accident, any type. I think you'll find the claim is still correct based on the numbers alone. More children ages 1 to 17 did die from guns than from traffic accidents into 2020, if you include all traffic accidents and if you include all gun deaths, right? But note that 17-year-olds can drive cars, right? And the last part I'm going to show, well, let me show you so this is the traffic accidents, ages 1 to 17. You can see here, it's about 800 something. Now, again, I didn't include all, I said I did, but I didn't include all traffic deaths. Like I didn't include all these things. So what happens is that, we had a height. Now, this right here is called a regression line. And basically what happens is the regression line, even though these have evened out here, this still shows a downward trend because it's what they call it's called a simple linear regression, SLR. So what is a regression line? The regression line is a best fit line that cuts the data into a scatter and line chart or scatter chart. That's what it does. Same number of dots above than below the line. Regression is based on the mean of the data. Mean is not a robust measure, which means highs and lows can affect it. Mean can be skewed. In essence, basing the regression, which is based on the mean, makes the regression suspicious at best. Predictions based on straight line regressions by logical conclusions are also suspicious. I wanted to throw that in just at the end. Heights of people. If two people have a child, then that child will have some of the basic characteristics of the parents. That's a fact. If two people over 6 feet tall have a child, then basically what happens is there's a distinct possibility, actually high probability, that the child will grow over 6 feet tall, right? So what happens if a child now, let's say 6'6", marries somebody else who's 6'6"? All of a sudden, you're going to have a child that is going to be above 6'6". That keeps on going, and what happens is, if that kept on going, you have all these kids walking around 8 and 9 feet tall. So regression of the mean means sooner or later it's going to pop back to the mean. You're going to have two people that are tall are going to have a child who's going to be an average height. That's called regression to the mean. That's what it's called. So that's where you have that change, and that's where things are pretty important. So without further ado, let's go to the CDC Wonder, because I think this is very important. So this is where you find the CDC Wonder. It's going to be wonder.cdc.gov. Now look at all this that's here. Multiple causes of death, final, underlying cause of death. So what we're going to do is heat waves, May to September. This is really good. This is very interesting data. Population, bridge race population, single race population. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to underlying cause of death, because that's where they went to. And what we can do is we can go through here, underlying cause of death by single race categories. This is only 3 years. This is almost 20 years. So what I'd rather do from the standpoint of looking at long range aspects is looking at this. But I'll tell you what, let's go to underlying cause of death by single race categories. And it's interesting because so you take 2018 to 2021, which goes pre-pandemic and then basically towards the end of the pandemic. And you can see you have to put I agree, which is fine. You put I agree, that this says you're not going to use it for bad purposes. And look at all the different things you can do. Now we're just going to do by year here, but we can do by census region. We can do by state, county. We can do by a ton of different things here. I'm just going to pick year. And then I say, hey, all the United States, I'm going to say, fine, we're United States, all categories. We're going to say all races, all genders. But with this age thing, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do single year. And then we're just going to go 1 year and then hold your control key. And 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 9, 10. And we're just going to do 11, 12, 13, 14. 15. We're just going to go to 15. And, it's 2018, 2021, and that's fine. And then we're going to say, select the causes of death. And this is where it's really interesting. You can go all the way down here. And basically what happens is that this will give you all different types of death, all the different types of things here. So what we do is we go through what they call external causes of morbidity. And I'm going to open this up just to show you exactly what it talks about. And here you go, transport accidents. So transport accidents would be those traffic accidents areas, but there's so many in there. Other external causes of accidental injury. So let's just open this up and show what that would be. So just this is going to be exposed to force of nature. Let's bring this up a little bit. There we go. Falls, exposure to smoke, fire and flames, electrical, breathing, all these different things, mechanical forces, accidental poisoning, overexertion, heat, all this. Intentional self-harm is here, assault. So I'll tell you, we're just going to do assault here, because just for time aspects. And here's assault by corrosive, assault by handgun and discharge. So by handgun discharge, we're going to select that one. We're going to select assault by rifle, assault by other and unspecified. And that's all we're going to do for this. But you can see, there's so many different things here, right? And then basically it shows here, you export the results. It'll be a text file. You can show totals, show all these different areas. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put send here. Now, if we put send, now remember, these are ICD-10 codes right here. ICD-10 codes. And you can change it. You can say ICD-13 cause list infants, injury intent mechanism, drug, alcohol. You can do any of those things. We just use the ICD-10 codes. When I send this, it'll process it. And sometimes it can take a while. Sometimes it'll take maybe 40 seconds, whatever. And there it is. So these are the years you have here. So look at the deaths just from assault. Deaths from assault by a gun for ages what? 1 to 16, right? So this is what they have. And this is crude rate, very small, right? Per 100,000. So 1,970. Now, if I were to go back to the request form and I were to add something, so I'm just going to remember that 1,970 there. So let's say I'm going to put here, we'll put here event of undetermined intent and poisoning exposure, hanging, handgun discharge, undetermined intent. So we're going to have, oops, didn't want that. There we go. Handgun discharge, okay, undetermined intent, rifle shotgun, undetermined intent, and then we're going to go back up to assault, and we're going to do assault by handgun, shotgun, and then we're going to send this one. So let's see, same age group, same everything, and basically what will happen is it'll process it through. And the nice thing about this is it'll process it through, and then it'll give you some different types of ways of looking at it. So look at this. You know, I added that, and look how the desk went. All of a sudden, the desk went down. You know, why would that be? Because basically, the request form, when you had that, you're basically kind of doing an and thing here, I think. Yeah. So basically, currently selected is this. Same thing, assault by handgun, assault by whatever. And, it's all the way from 1 to 15 years. So can you see how even adding something can put that confounding factor in there? So basically what's happening is you're doing almost an and type thing, right? So it's not making much sense. You just have an assault, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you have all these other ones there. So you have to be careful about how you do it. And you can just see the cause list here. This is the cause list. So this is the cause list for inference, injury intent. So this is homicide, and you can put fire, flame, natural, poisoning, suffocation, injury. So there's a lot of different ways. Again, you can parse these areas, right? You can parse this. So it's just there's a firearm right there. So homicide, firearm. And we're going to do 1 to 16. So can you see it just, and you can go to the underlying cause of death, 1999 to whatever, all of a sudden, look what I have here, 1971, which matches my 1970 when I talked about different types of assault with firearms. So you can do it generally, you can parse it, you can do all kind of different things. And sometimes it'll come up with this weird stuff. Now, you can do a chart, and the chart is normally like that. You can also do chart options. You can change it to a line chart if you want. And you can do it by line chart. You can do vertical, and you can do change chart. And there's your chart here. Okay, so I know this was a little bit long, but I just wanted to let you know that this is what you're talking about. And this is what, when we talk about checking the data and understanding the data, we talk about this. We talk about the ability to parse this data and be able to see it in different ways, to be able to come up with different perspectives. But remember, those different perspectives are elusive. You must take a look at it from the standpoint of definitions. And if you take a look at it from definitions, I guarantee you that it will be a much, much better presentation and visualization of what the data actually shows. So for the data show, this is Chris Greco signing off, saying thank you very much for watching, and have a great day. And remember to check the data.